Well, welcome everyone. My name is Jason Leaf. I'd like to welcome you to the Hope and Human Dignity Immigration Reform for a Better Iowa Conference. I work for the National Immigration Forum as a BBB, Bibles, Badges, and Business mobilizer. And our time together today is a virtual convening of leaders from the faith world, business world, and law enforcement. To have a conversation about immigration reform and to really try to talk about a way forward. How can we begin to move forward and seek meaningful immigration reform for our immigrant brothers and sisters, but also for the betterment of Iowa. We'll also be having a fourth panel that is a more focused panel on Storm Lake, Iowa, and that will be the last panel of the day. So the way that this will go is the business panel will begin first here at 9 o'clock and will go till about 9:55. At 10 o'clock, we will have the faith leader panel. And then at 11 o'clock, the law enforcement panel. And then at noon, we will have the Storm Lake panel. And so those of you who are with us, thank you for being here. And we hope you can stick with us through the whole time, but we recognize you may have to kind of jump in and out, and that's totally fine. But we just appreciate that you're with us here today. I'd like to introduce now the business panel. So what will happen is I'm going to give a short introduction to the business panel participants and to my co-moderator. And maybe I'll begin with my co-moderator. Ray Gibler is a professor in the business department, but he also here at Northwestern College. He also worked in Mexico as a registrar and accountant for a Christian college there. And so I also work at Northwestern. I teach in the Biblical and Theological Studies department. And so I've asked Ray to help kind of co-moderate this panel with me as a member of the business department here. And now, to introduce the members of the panel. Mike Ralston is the president of the Iowa Association of Business and Industry, Iowa's oldest and largest statewide business organization. So we want to welcome Michael. Francisco Hernandez works at Vermeer Manufacturing in Pella, Iowa as a dealer support specialist in the Parts Distribution Center. So Francisco, welcome. Glad that you're with us. Kyle Roed is the Vice President for Human Resources for CPM Holdings. And in this role, he oversees the aspects of human resources for 27 domestic and international locations in 11 countries. Henny is the founder and executive director of Embark, Ethnic Minorities of Burma Advocacy and Resource Center, Iowa's first refugee-led nonprofit service provider. Henny, welcome. And Janessa Calderon works for the Greater Quad Cities Hispanic Chamber of Commerce as the membership engagement coordinator. So Janessa, welcome. And Catherine Tran is the executive director for the Immigrant Entrepreneur Summit, IES, a nonprofit organization working to support immigrant business development. So that is our panel. So welcome to all of you. And I want to begin with this question, and I'm going to direct this question to some of you. And I'll start with Henny, if you're willing to begin. What do you see as somebody who works with the immigrant population, who works with refugees? What do you see as some of the economic opportunities and obstacles for immigrants here in Iowa?
Wow, that's an easy question to answer in like 2 minutes or less. I think, there's a lot of opportunity and there are a lot of challenges, and it's how we're able to leverage the opportunities for those challenges. So working with refugees from Burma, I myself am a child of immigrants. We have those that have many years of education, very high skilled, who might have had gaps in their education. We have those who might not have the formal education, but are widely sought because they're extremely hardworking. They speak multiple languages. It happens not to be English for some, but that just comes with education, training, and support. But I do see that there's a lot of missed opportunities in terms of recertification or training or upskilling. And the families who come to Iowa, and there's so many that we're not even seeing because Iowa is probably one of the top 5 states for resettlement for secondary migrants. When for the population that we serve, the newly arrived refugees from Burma and recently the Congo and Eritrea, we're seeing that I would say only 2 out of the 10 that are here are resettled directly. People are moving to Iowa and they are seeking these opportunities. I mean, I know of families who work, 12 hours and then they're still trying to study English and they're trying to just do whatever they can for their kids and for their family. So those opportunities are really rich, and it's hard to not be able to capitalize on that and build a system around supporting that to help Iowa and everyone.
Well, thank you for that. And Catherine, I'm wondering, with your work in the Immigrant Entrepreneurship Summit, what are the opportunities that you see for immigrants, for refugees as they come to Iowa? And what might be some obstacles that you see that they have to overcome?
Hello. Hi, Jason. Thanks everyone for having us. I think as similar, to what Henny has said, there are challenges of leveraging some of these resources, right? So there are targeted small business programs that will help minority populations. There's certainly agencies that help with resource navigation, such as CRI, Catholic Charities, Embark, of course. And then there are also funds that are specific to Black, Indigenous, and people of color that are available. But getting access to those resources and knowledge about them is a consistent and persistent challenge, So I think those there are resources available through the nonprofit space and economic development space as well. But economic resources, barriers to those, obviously language and cultural barriers, sometimes transportation barriers, and resource navigation in general is those, I think, are some of the key challenges. And then, there's a lack of recognition for some of the skills and background that they bring to the table. And sorry if I'm cutting out a bit.
That's all right. No, thank you. That's very, very insightful. Janessa, you work with the Hispanic community in the Quad Cities, and I guess I would pose the same question to you. What do you see in your work as some of the main obstacles and also some of the opportunities?
Yeah, so far what I'm seeing is some of the opportunities are people to help start their own businesses. There are great banks like Central Credit Union and then other credit unions that have programs and loans for immigrant entrepreneurs. And they're really great at helping them through the process, getting everything started, and to help start their own business, which we are more than happy to have in the community, as we know. And the other thing that we want to talk about more is some of the challenges that we have going on right now. And right now in the business community, some of those challenges are their personal protection equipment for their own business. And how do you begin that process? How do I pay for it? Where does that come from? And then some of the other things are moving things more online with COVID going on. And what does that look like? And how do I find someone, an advocate for me that I feel safe with to help me through this business opportunity? And then the carry out only for restaurants as well. So again, there might be some of those language barriers, and those are some of the challenges that they're facing right now.
Yeah, no, good. Francisco, I'm wondering, as somebody who working at Vermeer and in the work that you do, as an immigrant, what do you see as some of the opportunities and challenges? Is Francisco with us? We will come back to Francisco.
Can you hear me? Oh,
all right, there you go. Yes. Did you hear me?
yes. Actually, I heard your question. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to participate in. Great questions. I just want to say before I answer your question, you know, I worked for the Iowa Finance Authority for 3 years for the state of Iowa. I was a bilingual marketing specialist from 2005 to 2008. So I had to tackle some of these challenges that you are talking, and I'm fully aware of the small business development of the minority population because that was my job.
Yeah.
So I work for the Iowa State University Extension, you know, tackling some of these questions as well. When you mention about Vermeer, one of the things I want to say is that, you know, we have 2,500 employees at Vermeer, and I'll tell you that maybe it's the location, maybe it's the language issue, maybe it's the part of it is the education as well, that we don't have too many Latinos. I'll tell you, they are counted, and probably if I can count it with, I don't know, maybe 10 fingers and maybe twice, maybe that will be the extent of minorities that we have at Vermeer. Now, this is in the managerial and office setting.
Yeah.
But if you talk about the manufacturing, probably it's a little larger number because you don't require to speak the language. It's mostly like manual.
Yeah.
So I will say that I'm, you know, the opportunity, the access. Fortunately for me, I had a great opportunity to helped to be integrated into the community by a wonderful family. Unfortunately, in today's day and age, we don't have those kind of tools, whether it's a community or people to help you get integrated or knowledgeable about the opportunities that are out there. But also in terms of the application process for businesses to run, like some of the other panelists have actually mentioned. But yeah, we are very limited. One of the things I see is language. One of the other things is like also confident on people, because unfortunately we are living in a time where there's a lot of a stigma attached to minorities, and therefore they're sort of are being demonized out there. So that puts a little bit of a fear on a person to go and apply, even though their language is not quite up to speed. But also it puts a little bit of a variable of not rejection, but kind of a weariness on the employer side to say, well, I don't know this guy. Do they have documents? They don't have. I don't want to deal with that issue. So there's an opportunity out there, and there's also challenges in the fact of the actual person applying. And I just want to mention the quote that I just found through the United Way. You know, the minority population, the refugees and immigrants, provide about $846 million in sales tax. You know, we consume a lot, but unfortunately that information is not out there to be able for other businesses and for people in the community to realize that we need to help these people being, you know, just like myself, just like me, to be integrated fully.
Thank you. No, that's very insightful. Thank you very much. Ray, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, let's switch gears just slightly and kind of flip this to the other side of the equation. On the business side of things, Mike, maybe you could speak as president of the Association of Business and Industry in the state of Iowa. How do you see the business needs? What are the current needs of business related to immigration? And yeah, could you speak to that for a little bit?
You bet. Ray, thank you. Thank you to you and Jason for convening this forum. This is such an important issue. Appreciate being included. ABI is Iowa's oldest and largest manufacturing and general business trade association. So when I speak about these issues, it's through the lens of our manufacturing members. And when you talk about the current need of the Iowa business community related to immigrants, it is clearly the same as it is with everyone else. Iowa needs more people. We need more workers. And so sure, the manufacturers in the state have professional positions, engineers, finance people, that sort of thing, but there are some terrific careers in the operations and production side, and areas, and you've got Gary and Kyle here who can talk more about that. But the bottom line is we need immigration reform because we need to get people here to Iowa, and immigrants are, as Henny and Janessa and Catherine and Francisco, hard workers, terrific people. We need to get them here. So that's the number one thing. We need to make it easier for these people to be here and to stay here. And that's the number one need.
Kyle, maybe you could also speak to that same question. What, in your role as in human resources, what do you see some of the needs of the Iowa business community?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and the response of almost every single business professional I talk to is, we just need great people. Workforce is and has continued to be a challenge even through COVID. You know, I think there was a perception that when unemployment levels went up, we would not struggle to find talent, but we're still struggling to fill roles, and there's still plenty of opportunity out there. But I think in the context of this conversation, what the business community is really looking for is connection to some of those talent pools that maybe have been overlooked or have had a barrier. And as Mike said so eloquently, as we look at population growth and demographic trends, a lot of that growth really does need to come from the immigrant community. And, you know, my goal would be that Iowa continues to grow and prosper. And as the business community, I want to help support some of these new Iowans on their journey to success.
Yeah, good. Gary, could you maybe speak? You're involved in kind of the agricultural manufacturing side of things in Northwest Iowa. Could you speak to maybe how that's unique, or what kind of needs you see specifically related to immigration?
You know, it's a little bit redundant, you know, from Michael and Kyle, but there's no doubt the state of Iowa has been, you know, they've had a much lower rate of unemployment than the nation. Specifically in Northwest Iowa, we'll typically even have even lower rate than the state. So there's clearly lots of jobs, lots of opportunities, and I think what's really interesting to me is there's a wide range of opportunities. So really the lid somebody might have on themselves really almost becomes them looking at themselves on how much more do I want to pursue, because I mean, we've got people in our company that are you know, in accounting and human resources and maintenance and quality assurance and sales. I mean, so we have just a very, very diverse set of folks that are, you know, holding various ranks of position across the company. And, you know, the people that really kind of wanted to grow and develop have done so. But at the end of the day, Iowa is short of workforce. We continue to be, and there doesn't look to be anything kind of on the horizon that kind of solves that.
So thank you for that. And to kind of shift maybe now in the direction of asking questions about the immigration system itself, I'm going to address this question to Janessa. What changes do you think need to happen to the immigration system, or what changes do you think would be most helpful as you think about immigrants coming to Iowa and trying to build businesses and even find work?
Yeah, so I think the cost right now would be a challenge. I do, as we talked about earlier, there are loans and grants available through different credit unions and banks, but overall the cost is still going to be somewhat of a challenge. And so I think that would be very helpful. The other thing would be the time and the process that it takes. That might also be a barrier as well. If I want to get my business going and start getting everything ready, that's something that's out of my control as much as I will try. So that's something also. And then lastly, the uncertainty and the trust while going through the process. Who do I ask questions to? Who can I trust? Sometimes, as we know, there are people that do take advantage of situations like that. So those are three things: the cost, the time, the process, and the uncertainty.
Catherine, if I could ask you the same question, what changes do you think need to happen to the immigration system to help immigrants as they come and hopefully come to Iowa and start businesses?
That's a very hard question, and I actually did struggle with that one. Partly because I think there are different perceptions for immigrants that are barriers, right? And so that's just the access to education is going to be a big one, and that's what we're trying to help alleviate in the space that I'm in. But then in terms of like the larger systemic issues, those are hard to address, like from I think that's a large congressional issue oftentimes, and that's not something that can easily that feels accessible for people to address and feel like they can effectively change. I mean, certainly with the visa process, those type of process in terms of review and those type of things can be streamlined and made less hoops, I guess, for people to jump over so that they can access those visas and stay within the workforce and not have to derail their life for a time and in that unknown space of waiting. But as Janessa mentioned, yes, access to capital and working capital startups are going to be a difficult one. Obviously, those who don't have papers, those are going to be a barrier. They'd have to, get an ITIN, and just learning the process of what is available is,
Yeah, and I think, to raise the political question, obviously, I think it is a political issue. And, at this juncture here, very close to the election and politics, immigration and the refugee issue is an important issue. And so, I'll turn to Henny here with a similar question, but I want to add in, the president just came out with the number of refugees, the 15,000, which is very, very low. And so I'm wondering if you might speak to that just, a little bit. What changes do you see that should happen when it comes to refugees, when it comes to asylum, and also the issue of immigration?
Wow. That in itself is a critical question. We're looking at a process that was broken and now has become really almost impossible. You're talking about a group of community members who have been deemed safe and gone through a long, extensive process to be resettled. And there's so many barriers. For example, and then on the asylees as well. For example, with asylees, when you apply, before you used to be able to get a work authorization. Now you apply and you cannot work for, I have families that can't work for over a year, and they're large families, right? They can't work. I have refugees who come and they have children and who are waiting in the pipeline to come, right? This is, we were talking about just from an economic perspective or a worker perspective, your family unit is critical, right? And you've all of a sudden broken up families through that process. Once you are here as a refugee, the policies are that the priority is that you have to get a job right away, right? Regardless, right? So instead of allowing for time for education and support, especially for those who can acclimate and adjust, you're immediately put to a job. And a lot of times those jobs are very survival level jobs. So where you had this flow of refugees and asylees and others who come and then help another generation, and you had united families. Now you have the complete opposite. You have refugees caught in limbo. Many who are approved to come here have no other options. We have, because of the travel ban, many families who are just caught in that process. We have those who need and how bureaucratic and how complicated the whole process is, from getting a green card within a year to your work authorization expiring. And for refugees, work authorization does not expire. So by their status, but still we're seeing that employees are letting them go because they can't get their green card. They can't get those documents. We've had so many issues with documents and applications not being processed. We have a huge wait list of those who are been studying for their citizenship and have not been able to get that done. And you pay the fees, you don't get those refunded. Those, and there is no recourse either. And I should also say, for the refugee admissions process, all that vetting and the very intentional, the steps that they take to come here is really dismissed by the current administration. And I saw a statistic about because refugees have to pay back their travel loan. I don't know if people know that, but they are charged for their plane tickets. So they come here with a debt, and then I guess the idea is like, how can we help them build credit? The payback rate for the refugee community is about in the 90s in terms of paying back their loan. And I mean, I think that goes to show you the level of trust and hard work that they put into it. But I don't know, I think I've kind of veered off a little bit.
No, that's great. And so I just want a quick follow up, and then I'll let Ray move the conversation differently. But so as you talk about these sounds very frustrating, and these roadblocks for refugees, is it primarily a political issue then, that whether it's this administration or past administrations, but in this administration specifically, has it become more difficult, and have there been roadblocks that have been put up?
Oh, absolutely. The roadblocks maybe before were more bureaucratic, and it was the systems, and because we have not had there is no pathway really for many people, but now these are intentional roadblocks, right? So, and there's not much maneuverability in the law, right? So you really don't have anywhere to go to appeal, right? So, or if you call there is really no recourse for any applicant, and for many in the community, they have nowhere to go because legal fees are super expensive. So we struggle with trying to find legal immigration help. There's very few providers in Iowa, and there is a long waiting list, months. And this means that they can't get jobs, they can't get benefits, they can't bring their family members over. And so it trickles down from government, right? And then it's government policies with immigration. And it's also, I really do think we got to look in terms of a constellation or an ecosystem, and what does that policy look like, and with other parts of the government as well.
Okay. No, thank you for that. Ray, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I was gonna ask Gary, maybe we'll start with you. From the business side of things, what changes to the immigration system would be most helpful from your perspective?
Yeah, first off, I feel fairly unqualified to even really comment to any degree, but I just tell you what I would hear maybe from some of our employees as it relates to their families. They would say the process is difficult. It can take years to gain citizenship, and that it seems daunting to them. But I don't understand the details myself, so I don't feel really qualified to comment other than it's obviously hard.
Do you see, Gary, the problems with getting, like, you have qualified workers, but they don't have the appropriate visas? Like, have you run into some of those issues, and how do you overcome those?
Yeah, we occasionally do run into that where, the documentation doesn't support their legal right to work. And as an employer, it's our obligation to make sure that people have the right to work. So we do our job to make sure that things are appropriate and, within the framework of what we have to work with. So
it sounds like maybe some kind of an expanded visa process or paper, some kind of process would be helpful from your perspective.
It would, and I think too, Ray, just to think in terms of just more permanent residency of workers here and more long term. I know because there's some of the programs out there like for seasonal workers. Well,
Sure.
I really don't. I think Iowa's so deficit on workers that seasonal workers just hardly do a dent in what we really need.
Well, and I think that some of those seasonal workers are more geared towards some of the truck farming or the fruit farming or the, some of the different areas of the country have some of those things maybe a little more than Iowa does for the jobs that are available. But
yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. Kyle, maybe you can speak to, from your perspective, how do you see, what kind of changes do you think would be helpful in the immigration process for employers?
Yeah, well, if it makes you feel any better, Gary, I don't think anybody really understands this stuff. It's so complicated and convoluted. The amount of legal fees that I've incurred as a business just to help somebody obtain H-1B visas. I think we've had 3 recent cases in the last year or so. I mean, exorbitant fees for an attorney just to try to figure this out for us. So, as much as we can reduce complexity, increase immigration levels that are allowable through the visa process. I get pretty geared up on this because I have had employees or candidates who I've made offers to, and done every attempt to bring him in. I have one right now. He's from Brazil, recent college graduate, had his OTP visa or OPT visa application out, did that all in a timely manner, but there's such a delay at the visa office that he's literally sitting at home waiting for his visa to be approved so that he can come work for me. And he has all the skills that we need. We needed somebody that was multilingual. He has that capability, and he's just waiting. He's not contributing to the economy in any way, shape, or form, and we've got a vacant position held open for him. So, I'd like to see a better expedition process for the visas. I'd like to see simplification, and I'd like to see an expansion of available visas for people to get. It's just kind of a mess, quite honestly. We've got open jobs, and I've got candidates that I can't hire for, and that's a problem. Something's broken.
Yeah, that's I think that's a common theme in many. Yeah, and we'll get into the visas maybe a little bit later, kind of some of those differences. But yeah, Mike, maybe you can speak from your perspective, working with lots of different businesses. What do you have some ideas for what changes could be made? Yeah.
You bet, Ray. Maybe I can just piggyback on what Gary and Kyle have said. And you're right, there is news when it comes to visas. We can talk about that later. But when it comes to the immigration system itself, what everybody has said is true. Number one, it needs to be standardized because you can go to a different office and get a different answer in a different time frame. So there needs to be standardization.
Right.
The process needs to be shortened. There needs to be fewer documents, needs to be sped up, those sorts of things. It's got to be streamlined, fewer steps, that sort of thing. The e-verification system the government uses is outdated. It's not accurate. It's not up to date. All those things need to be fixed. And so I don't know, people say, gee, I don't have the answer. The answer is to fix those things, and we can all do it if we get at it. So just to confirm what everybody said, it's a mess.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is resources. Some of those issues you addressed with some resources could be streamlined. Certainly the system could be updated and with resources.
Too many people see it as not their issue. They see it as someone else's issue, You know, I know we're going to talk about obstacles and what are the political obstacles. Those are the obstacles, the politics in the situation. We need to get past that, but that's not my question, so I'll quit. I'm sorry.
Well, that's actually a great segue because, and I understand this is the business panel, right? This is the business leader panel, and you might say to me, you know, hey, Leaf, I'm not a politician. I'm not in politics, but it's important for us to kind of think about the politics. And so, I guess my question is this, and Janessa, I'm gonna start with you. How do we get political traction for immigration reform? What are maybe one or two issues that can be a way to try to move this forward and help people understand the need for immigration reform?
Yeah, so right now, at least in the Quad Cities community, a lot of these immigrant-owned businesses are community hubs. So this is where a lot of people are spending time and bonding with one another, which makes it a great place for taking polls, surveys, distributing information. And then also any other allies of businesses that want to see more immigrant entrepreneurs in the community, they can help promote immigrant business resources and make it a great segue to provide access for some of these information that we were talking about, and how sometimes the distribution can be confusing, and overall just be allies in that form.
Okay. Henny, how do we move this forward politically? So I think we all understand that we're dealing with issues that are very political, and in many ways on the immigration issue, there's just been a log jam. You know, issues become important, like DACA, for a little while, and then decisions get made, and then they go away. How can we get political traction and political movement to make immigration reform more of a priority?
That's a good question. I think what is always going to move politics are the people. And I think the people that might be missing are the people who are refugees and immigrants themselves, building their voice, us creating opportunities for them to be decision makers, and for them to share the stories. I think that's the crux of why Embark started, because we believe that the best way to support refugees is to recognize that they have the assets and the skills to address the needs. I mean, they're the ones, it's neighbors helping neighbors, however they can. And so what I learned from the community, and when we start to take a more granular focus as to why, right? You're talking about someone who's waiting 2 years for their daughter to be reunited. I don't know anyone who would not be moved by that, or someone who's been studying to get their GED for years, but just needs that extra support, right? And I think the really going out and building that relationship, and so building community and integration with the refugee and immigrant community here, right? And how we can have more leadership and intentionally inviting and listening. I think that will help. That would also help tremendously, because I feel like in my conversations here, often I'm the only voice that's bringing that perspective, and that perspective is from my staff and my team and our community that we're always in conversation with.
Well, and let me follow up with that just a little bit. How do we move? How do we help people get past the ideological issues, that this isn't a Republican Democrat issue? I mean, you can be a Republican and Democrat and still be supportive of immigration reform, and yet it seems like we get stuck in these ideological camps. How do we push past that?
I think it's, what are the stories that are being told? You know, what is the perception? What is, you know, and how do we combat that with stories of authenticity, of people, of families, of workers, and then really bring that out there, you know, and from the source. So it's not spin, and it's not this what's currently happening. But so I think we're not hearing enough of those stories of, and forums like this are very important, obviously.
Good, thank you. Francisco, address the question to you as well. What do you see as some of the primary issues for enacting change? How do we begin to move the needle, so to speak, on this immigration reform?
Thank you. That's a great question, Jason. Well, we just touch a number of variables, and we talk a lot about refugees and immigrants coming in with certain type of application and process. But I just want to say, with my own experience, with part of my own experience, we have a large number of undocumented, talented, productive folks here already. They're already here in the United States. The issue, we had to go to the root of the problem, which is to find a humane, reasonable, and workable process to integrate them legally, so these businesses can actually tap into that talent. So, some of our panelists talk about, support, and unfortunately, many of these agencies that are talking out there about in support of immigrants and undocumented individuals are actually agencies that focus on that particular community. But what I feel we need, and that's part of the reason that I always enjoy talking to Mary and Dringa at Vermeer, is the fact, the responsibility of the actual businesses out there, the business community, people like, the Vermeers, Pella windows, you name it, to take an active stand on the issue, because they have the political and the funding capital to make things happen. I mean, small immigrants and undocumented agencies are not going to make a dent on it, because it's like me talking on behalf of immigrants or undocumented. My name is Francisco Hernandez. What are they going to say? Well, that guy is actually, what is he going to say about his own people or his own group? So we need the other side. We need the people who actually, like Mike said, and you talk about, we need the people who need the workers, the people who need the talent, to take a stand, an active stand, and say, hey, state of Iowa, hey, federal government, we need to make a change and be serious about it. Because if we just get stuck with the idea that this is a convoluted system of immigration, if I don't understand that, and we take a step back, then nothing is going to happen. Because I've been here since about 1994, which was the spurge, the catapulted of the minority population, specifically Hispanics, of a 200% increase. When I arrived, there were 23,000, based on the census, Latinos in Iowa. Now we have close to 200,000. It's a big percentage of the population. So going back to your question, I think that, yes, it's complicated. The system is broken. There's a lot of challenges that we had to face in terms of the political, field. But that's what I always like to talk to people like Mary Andringa, because she's the one who has the capital, political and economic, to stand up to the government and say, hey, I have the talent pool right here, but I don't have a process to get them to work. And Vermeer needs workers at all times.
Yeah, thank you. Very insightful. Ray, maybe you can kind of take off from that.
Yeah, are we moving towards the visa question,
Sure.
Jason?
Wherever you want to go.
Yeah, so I guess maybe talking about, you had mentioned, Jason, earlier about the ideological barriers and ways to overcome that. And I think Henny had a great point with telling stories and learning more about kind of people's stories. Maybe Gary, Kyle, Mike, one of you guys, or more than one of you, could speak to the fact, or to the economic implications of that. What are some of the economic realities of immigration that might help us overcome ideological barriers? I think there's misinformation out there, there's disinformation out there. What are some of those things that might help us make progress?
Hey, I'll jump in, Ray. And I think Glenn Leach in the chat box has raised the point that we try to make all the time. There are all kinds of reasons to make the case for immigration reform. It's the right thing to do. we're taking care of people. But if people don't want to listen to that, or they want to get caught in some ideological argument, we try to focus on the economic argument. We need workers. Gary and Kyle both have jobs available right now. They need people to fill, and there are companies like that all over the state. So we try to say that the real issue here with immigration reform is we need these people. They're great workers. They're great neighbors. We need to get them here to the state. I think most of our neighbors in Canada, Australia, I don't know, in the Western countries anyway, their visa rate is like the high 60s, and they base that on an economic model. In the United States, only 14% of the visas are approved for economic reasons. We need to change that around because we need to get these people here. I probably talk too much. Kyle and Gary are on the front line, so I'll quit there. But anyway, that's the argument we try to make. It's an economic one.
Yeah,
absolutely. I agree with that 100%. And for me, I like to phrase this as economic inclusion. And this isn't charity work on behalf of the businesses. This is a substantial business plan, and there's numbers behind it. So if I can look at some of the macro numbers, these are U.S. Census Bureau 2018 numbers. There's 33,000 immigrant workers in manufacturing. There's 17,000 immigrant workers in healthcare and social assistance, 14,000 immigrant workers in accommodation and food services. And these are the areas that we are struggling to find available talent in. And so, there's already people out there. There's already companies that are hiring these individuals. On the micro level, I'll tell you, a story of some actual business impact. So I had a second shift department. It was cycling 100% turnover every year. So if I had 20 people in the department, that means I had to replace 20 people every single year. So unsustainable, totally disruptive to the environment. And I actually worked with Henny's organization, Embark, to go out and do things a little bit differently. We reached out to the Burmese community locally, found a great individual who was going to community college. He was multilingual, and brought him in as a trainer and a translator to help, really kind of build a port of entry process for these individuals. He was connected with the community, brought in some contacts that he knew would do well with the work. And that was our pilot program. We ended up taking that department from 100% turnover to 0% turnover within a 6-month period.
Wow.
These individuals stayed. They had an opportunity. We were teaching them skills. They were gaining English skills because they were just in an environment where people spoke English, and they were getting support. And the actual cost to implement that program was absolutely minuscule compared to the benefit that we got from the reduction in turnover. So that then it just became a strategy because it was working, and there was true dollars and cents impact, and that's the language of business, is dollars and cents. So it just works. And I personally, I have very strong feelings and emotions about it, but as I look at it from the business side of things, I think if you take the emotion out of it and you just look at the actual results and impact of doing these types of programs, it just makes economic sense, period.
Absolutely. Yeah. Gary, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, just briefly, it's kind of maybe stating the obvious to some degree, but, face it, strong businesses hire people, make strong communities, make better quality of life for the community members to be a part of. They really are the backbone of Iowa. And yeah, I mean, to really drive that economic factor is from a business perspective is really the card that we have to play. We have to continue to remind people that we've got good paying jobs. Wages in Iowa continue to go up, which is great, and likely will continue to do so as long as we have a deficit of workers.
Yeah, I don't have the data at my fingertips, but it seems like the other argument to make here is the types of jobs that immigrants typically take. Many of those jobs are not jobs that are currently being competed for by people who are not immigrants. And so that would be another argument in the economic sphere that might be winsome.
Well, we have 5 minutes left, and what I would like to do is give each of you an opportunity to, and you'll have to be brief because we only have 5 minutes, but just to maybe give some final thoughts, like what's an issue that we haven't touched on yet that you wanted to make sure that was brought up, or maybe to kind of make another point on something that someone else said. So we'll just kind of move through everyone. And so Mike, maybe we'll start with you.
Well, I'll be brief, Jason. Thank you very much. I want to address Matthew McPike's question in the Q&A box down below. And I think, Matthew, there are challenges created by immigrants being located in rural areas or larger metro areas, because in larger metro areas, there tends to be a better support or backdrop. You know, you've got Henny and Janessa on the call today that lead organizations that provide support. And so in some of our rural areas, there may not be that support. And the great news is that employers often provide some support. But Jason, I want to thank you and Ray for this forum today and for continuing to shine the light on this issue, because it's important. And that's the way we're going to get traction finally, is by continuing to talk about it. In our view, continuing to focus on, as Kyle said, the dollars and the cents, and we'll hopefully make progress. But thanks for the opportunity to be a part of this today.
Oh, thank you for being a part of it. Appreciate it. Francisco, maybe you could give a final thought, briefly, some final thoughts.
On mute. Thank you for the invitation to participate. Very, very insightful. Thank you. I was just gonna say, you know, and part of it because as me, you know, I'm a Latino, I'm a Mexican American now. You know, the Latinos are the largest and fastest growing minority population. And I guess if I want to talk about, I don't want to, you know, single out our group, but, you know, we have the talent, we have the energy, we have the work ethic. The only thing that is missing is that process to kind of take a stand with the business community and be out there to change the perception, the stigma that sometimes are attached onto us. And, you know, because of the results that all your panelists mentioned, you know, it's economic stability, community development, cultural enrichment. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities. It's going to be difficult and it's going to be challenging, but I think that if we all work together as a community, I think we can make it happen.
Great, thank you. Kyle, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, as well, appreciate the time and the opportunity to share some of my story here. I think the only point that I would just reinforce is the fact that if you're in the business community and you're looking to do something to help, there are a lot of resources out there that can help you. So get connected with your local nonprofit agencies, your local community resource partners that are helping the immigrant community. You know, I've had a significant amount of success asking experts what to do and how to do things. This is what they do all day long. They help people. And so if you can get those connections within your community as a business leader, that's where the secret sauce is in my mind.
Nice, thank you so much. Catherine, just a few words on something that hasn't been mentioned yet or a point you would like to leave.
Yeah, so I think a lot of it is about power, right? So, and thinking about ways that we can elevate immigrants and refugees in society. And I think a big way to do that, at least from my perspective, is to give them, to help them be more economically mobile. You know, from the perspective of being an immigrant in the United States, you know, we don't have like the history of having, you know, a fund, right? Of having that capital that a lot of people have access to as native born. So I think, you know, being able to give people access to economic mobility, either through entrepreneurship or through business development, are going to be huge factors in giving a voice.
Wonderful. Yeah, no, thank you. And I just want to plug that your Immigrant Entrepreneur Summit, the National Summit, is on November 21, right? Yeah, so they can Google that and they can find and sign up for that. Janessa, just a final word.
Yeah, so again, I want to thank you for allowing the Quad Cities Hispanic Chamber to be part of this panel. And I think we can all agree that immigrant entrepreneurs can benefit our communities. And so I think with that, there are some personal responsibilities that we can take as part of being hub for resources and just kind of getting those out there and making sure that we can all be allies for this.
Good, thank you. Henny.
I appreciate being on a panel like this that's diverse, and I think that's what's needed, is that we need different people from different sectors coming together. I would say probably the intentionality of focusing on this and what is the systems and structures, everything from, are there mentors, are there connectors, are there navigators, are we building bridges and connecting it and looking for the long view, because right now there's so many gaps. I really do liken it to a little step or a plank, which gets you just falling through the cracks. Is there contextualized English? Could we do things differently by hiring in a cohort? Can we do training like Kyle, when Kyle and I and Embark worked on this, it was the intentionality, it was the system and support, and Embark as a refugee-led organization, we are 60-something% refugees and immigrants. We have an AmeriCorps program that's all throughout the state. We are the only one. I like anyone to think through any other social service provider that is immigrant or refugee led. And why is that when Nebraska or Minnesota has so much more? Because when COVID hit, we were getting about 1,000 calls a day. So with business partners, without that support system, without a higher education, thinking about contextualized sector specific education, without human services being available and accessible, what does that mean? So again, I go back to like that ecosystem, and then something to continuing conversations like this with unlikely partners. So thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. And Gary, you get the last word.
Okay, I'll make it very brief. I just think that economic opportunities for people that want to advance in the employment base in the state of Iowa have never been better. I grew up in the 80s when I'm probably one of the older guys on here, when there were no jobs. And right now, the opportunities are endless. So I'm very optimistic, and I think it's just a great opportunity to grow as a person in your professional career, whatever you want to do, and don't put a lid on your own head.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. Thank you for taking the time, and blessings on the work that you do. So thank you.